Watch this. Thank you very much. I'm an alcoholic, and my name is Bev, and I am delighted to be here, and I am happy to say that I am a member of the Welcome Home Group in Listowel, Ontario, and I will invite you to come up and see us any Friday night at 7:30. It meets in the Lutheran Church on Wallace Street, Listowel. And so the fact that I have been invited to come here again, I will say, to this wonderful conference, for us all to be back together again after a few years of not being able to, is indeed a tremendous, tremendous gift to me and a pleasure. And I will tell you that I don't know if this is a little bit of bragging or not, but I'm going to do it anyway. I spoke here at this conference at the Royal York 50 years ago. So the fact that I stayed sober and alive for all this time to be invited back is really something very special to me. Here it is, 50 years ago, I was speaking on a beginners panel, and now I'm speaking on some old age panel or something. And anyway, it's all fun. It's all fun, and I can tell you I am extremely grateful for, I've heard it said many times, as it well should be, over this weekend, thanking the people that put this all together. I've had the good fortune over the years to work on conventions, the Western Ontario Convention in London, and I know it is no small feat. And so the fact that you have worked tirelessly for all of this time so that I don't know how many are here, I suppose 2,000 or so, maybe more, that we can come here and enjoy the program, enjoy the speakers, enjoy each other, is really something to be very grateful for. So thank you to the committee. I can't say that I really know very much about humility. I've looked it up in the dictionary. I looked it up on my iPad. I brought this thing, thank you very much. There is a thing that you can buy probably anywhere, but this I got in Akron about humility. I won't read it all to you, but it sat in the desk of Dr. Bob in Akron, and it's perpetual quietness. I know nothing about perpetual quietness. So what I think I'll do is share with you a little bit of what it was like and what happened and what my life is like today. That's really all I know. I know that it has only been through the grace of God, there's no doubt in my mind about that I have been able to stay sober a day at a time since March the 1st, 1971. For that, I am very grateful. I can't say that I was so grateful that my husband kicked me out and said, you either smarten up, get well, I know there's help for you. You know, I wasn't thinking, oh, isn't that a wonderful thing for him to say? And I think I'll just run over to AA. What I remember about it is that one afternoon, my husband said to me, Bev, I am sorry that you are sick, but I also know there is something that you can do about it. And if you're not prepared to do something about it, we're not prepared to live this way anymore. They've written books on intervention since that time, but he did his own intervention because I really didn't care very much about what was going to happen to him because of the way he was treating me, but I didn't want to lose my little boy. And so somehow or another, I got over, and neither one of us could ever remember how we found out, but I got to the Tuesday North in London, Ontario on March the 2nd, 1971, and on and off I was a member of there. I moved away for a while but came back, and I remained a member of the Tuesday North in London, Ontario. And what I can tell you is I went to that meeting, Dave dropped me off, and I cannot tell you a thing about what I heard at that meeting, but what I can tell you, and I think it's so important, and it's just wonderful to see all the greeters around here this weekend making us all feel so welcome. That night, there were greeters at the Tuesday North. I have no idea what anybody said at that meeting, but I have since learned that Maya Angelou, I think, writes, people won't remember what you said. People won't remember what you did, but they will always remember how they made you feel. And that's what I can remember of that night, March the 2nd, 1971. I can remember how I felt. And the people that were there made me feel they were glad to see me. And I can tell you they were glad to see me there. They were glad to see me come. Up until that time, most people were glad to see me leave. But I felt good. I really knew that they were glad to see me. That's all I remember. And for whatever reasons, certainly again, had nothing to do with me, by the grace of God, I loved Alcoholics Anonymous. You don't hear a lot of people saying they went to their first meeting and just loved Alcoholics Anonymous. But I did, because everybody seemed to me to be feeling good. And I felt so much shame, and not humility, but humiliation about the way I had been living, that I just could not bear. I could not bear myself. I couldn't stand myself. I could not have stayed not drinking without you. because I couldn't stand to think about the human being that I had become. This is the craziest thing. I have 30 minutes. Can you imagine a woman trying to tell a story in 52 years in 30 minutes? I mean, this is a joke. Anyway, I think I'll just start at my first drink. That will eliminate about 20 years of my life. So anyway, I had not had anything to drink up until the time I was invited to this party. And I'd been at parties where there was alcohol. I don't know why I didn't drink. It just didn't appeal to me, I guess. Others were drinking, but I was one of the people that seemed to be enjoying life as I was growing up. Often you don't hear those stories, but I enjoyed school. I enjoyed high school because I love sports. And I was involved in all kinds of sports and quite good at them, really. So I was getting a lot of attention that way, and I just loved sports. At any rate, I hadn't had anything to drink, and I'm at this party. It's Christmas time, and it's in the home of one of my bosses. It was a beautiful home. There was a fireplace, there was a Christmas tree, and there were a lot of important people at that party. Now, to this day, I have no idea what important people are, but I'll tell you what I thought they were then. They were the bosses, and there were older people. My God, some of them were 30, 35 years old. And did you ever have that feeling where you feel you have arrived? Well, I felt I had arrived. And when this lady came by, she had a silver tray in her hand, and on that silver tray were some long stem crystal glasses. And if you don't remember very much more about what I have to say today, and you probably won't, just remember my first drink, please. It was on a silver tray, long stem crystal glasses, some pink bubbly stuff in it, in a beautiful home with important people. And I thought I had arrived. And when she came by with this silver tray in her hand and asked me if I would like to have something to drink, those long stem crystal glasses had some pink bubbly stuff in it. And instead of saying no thank you, I said yes please. And if I thought that life had been good to me up until then, let me tell you, it picked up from there. Some good things began to happen. And what happened was I just loved everybody. But what was even more important was everybody else loved me. Now, when I was new, and I certainly wasn't trusting you, could I have my water? Such a gentleman. Thank you. Thank you. And I wasn't trusting everybody. So I used to say everybody. What I really should have been saying was every man. Because I didn't really care what the women were saying or who they were saying it to. But I sure loved it when those men told me how wonderful I was. They used to tell me they wished their wives were more like me. They used to tell me they wished their wives understood them the way I understood them. And you know that for years I believed all that crap. Anyway, I had a wonderful time at the party. I didn't think, oh boy, this is what I want to be doing for the rest of my life. I didn't think I can hardly wait for another opportunity to drink. I didn't get drunk, or would it seem. I didn't get in a fight. I didn't go to jail. I wasn't in an accident. I just had a wonderful time at the party. And then I began to live my life, I guess, the way I wanted to live it. I had a father that I loved and adored. He wanted me, of course, to go on to university. He wanted me to travel. He wanted me to wait for some time until I got married, that I'd have lots of time to be married, but that I should do all these things as I was growing up. And I was under the impression that I would do anything in the world to please him. But what I really realized after a few inventories in AA, that I would do anything to please my father as long as it was what I intended to do in the first place. So instead of doing all those things, I was working, and then soon after I was working, I was going to get married, and I was going to live happily ever after. I was always big on living happily ever after. I think Smitty, I don't know if there's anybody here that remembers Smitty or not, but anyway, she was my wonderful friend in the beginning of my AA life. And we discovered and determined, oh, you know Smitty. Yeah. Anyway, we decided that we'd seen one too many Doris Day, Gordon MacRae movies, where they were always paddling down Moonlight Bay, living happily ever after. So I got married. This again, my father thought that I was not ready for marriage, but I got married. The greatest aspirations that I had in life was to be a good mother, a good wife, and a good, decent, human, Christian person. I know our program is spiritual, but that's what I knew then. And that's what I had seen in my family, and that's what I wanted to be. And by the time I got to you, as I said that night on March the 2nd, 1971, I could not have been further away than that aspiration that I had. I got married. We had 2 children. That marriage didn't work. I left those children behind, and I began the world of pretending. I was going to pretend that everything was just the way it should be. My solution to all this was to marry a man completely opposite to my first husband, because after all, he had not done things well. And so if I got somebody just the opposite, which I did, then I would live happily ever after. We'd been living in Galt, Cambridge. We moved down to London, got an old home up in the north end of the city. Beautiful place, what I'd always wanted. Our son David was born. And now I was going to be able to live happily ever after. And I did, for a little while. For a little while. And then I began what I couldn't have described then, but I can now. I began to get those feelings of restlessness, irritability. I always wanted to be someplace I wasn't. Now, I thought that I was so happy with this new husband and this new little boy. But then I began to miss the action, is what I began to miss. And so I knew I shouldn't be doing some of the things that I was doing, so I would drink so that I could do them. And then after I had done them, I would drink so I didn't have to think about it. I would say that's insanity. When you're drinking to do something you know you shouldn't do and you really don't want to do it, but yet you want to do it and you do it and then you have to drink so you've done it, you're crazy. That didn't go on very long until I began the rounds of the psychiatric hospitals and psychiatric wards. They didn't have detoxes and so on then. And I'd be bouncing in and out of there. When they didn't know what to do with me, that's where I'd go. And when I was in there, I would seem to be okay. It wouldn't take me very long to snap out of things and get feeling well again. And I remember Sister Margaret at St. Joseph Psychiatric Hospital, the psychiatric ward at St. Joe's Hospital. So I think, Mrs. Thompson, the problem with you is you get well too fast. And I thought that was a peculiar thing to tell somebody in a hospital. I thought the whole objective was to get well. But anyway, I'd be bouncing around there. It would be just a day or two. Then I would look at all these other women that appeared to me to be not well. And I think maybe I could help them. So what I became was an occupational therapist. I'd be pretending that I knew what I was doing, and I would send them out for bath towels, a zipper, some binding, and we made house coats. Everybody that was in the psychiatric ward of St. Joseph's Hospital from 1969 to 1971 was sporting one of these lovely house coats. And this worked well when I was the occupational therapist, but when I got home, all I'd done in that hospital was make a whole lot of resolutions. There was no solutions. There were resolutions that I was making. And I would resolve that we were going to be doing this, that, the other thing, whatever it was. But before I got my plan in place, I would start to drink. And then, of course, I didn't know anything about the first drink. Nobody ever told me anything about what the doctor's opinion was, that I had a mental allergy. And just simply, I didn't know a thing. And so I was going to do it differently, and I would take a drink. And, of course, all of you here know how that would end up. So having taught patients how to make house coats, I brought mine home. But instead of me being the occupational therapist, I was the drunken lush of a housewife. And I would wander around that house day in and day out in that old house coat. The only time it was orange and white. And the only time it ever got washed was when my husband couldn't stand the stink of it any longer, because by that time I'm drinking cheap wine and it's coming out my pores. So he would wash the house coat. I had a pair of blue, furry, fuzzy, gummy, sticky slippers, and I've had at least 10 people here at this conference tell me not to forget to talk about them. So I guess they knew about my slippers too. And you couldn't wash them because they had leather on the bottom, so they just stuck and stunk all the time. They'd stick to the floor, and I'd stagger back and be able to kind of pull it up and stagger on my way. Now, as they say in the fashion shows, to complete this ensemble, I had my old red wig. And they were made out of some kind of synthetic stuff, and if they got near heat, they got all singed and fringed. So this was all singed and fringed, no hair on the back. When it fell off, I'd pull it back on, and it would be upside down, inside out. And as I say in the fashion shows, to complete all this ensemble, I had my burnt orange and moss green kerchief that I tied around here in a pretty little bow. So I know that that's the only thing of this talk you'll remember. But let me tell you, it wasn't so funny then. Not so funny. I would go in to the bathroom and look at myself in the mirror. 5 minutes, thank you. Look at myself in the mirror and wonder whatever happened to that Bev that used to be. Whatever happened. And Butch, I remember your sponsor, Bobby, well. I sought my soul I could not see. I sought my God eluded me. But I sought my brothers and sisters here in AA, and here I have found all three. Because there was no expression in my eyes, there was nothing. There was nothing. My soul was dead. And I'd get out of that outfit and go down to the market. And remember, I asked you if you just remember the beautiful home, the silver tray, the long stem glasses. Well, I'd go down to the market, having bought 2 or 3 cheap bottles of wine, go over to the market, sit on the john in the market. The latch was broken on the door. I would stick my foot up against the door to keep it closed. I would tear the paper down, the brown paper on the wine bottle. My hands were always shaking. The wine would come down on the bottle. I would tip it up to my mouth, and I'd drink a half a bottle of that cheap wine. And I would think, and I would cry, if my grandmother could only see me now. So, from that beautiful home with the long stem crystal glasses to the market with the brown paper bag and the cheap wine. It took 15 years. If I take a drink today, it'll take me 15 minutes to get back to the market. I would cry, please, dear God, help me. And I told you how my God helped me by having my husband Dave do the intervention. He went to the ARF. He went to the library. He found out what he could do for me. And I landed up here with you people. I may not have demonstrated through the years, and I certainly didn't, a lot of humility, but I'll tell you I've had a lot of humility, because it has never left me that if you folks hadn't been there for me on March the 2nd of 1971, I'd have been out on the street. The garbage bags were on the veranda packed with my clothes, and I'd have been gone. But instead of that, I was able to come home after that meeting, and a day at a time, I'm like all the other speakers. You know, we just don't then go tiptoeing through the tulips to live happily ever after, I can tell you. But it always got better. I had 2 little children from my first marriage that I left behind, and I want to end my story. I would like to end my story by telling you the reason I'm in Listowel at the Welcome Home group is because those 2 little children that I left behind, when my husband passed away 2 years ago now, they packed me up and took me to Listowel to live, I'm always great on this, to live happily ever after. I may not be living happily ever after, life happens, but I'm certainly living happy. And I have been richly blessed by Alcoholics Anonymous, the God of my understanding, a day at a time, to be with you, and I can't think of any place I would rather be this afternoon is with all you wonderful people. Thank you.
You know, the good news is we're not finished yet. And now for our second panelist, from the Florin Group in Hamilton, Ontario, please help me welcome Dick D.
Good afternoon. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a member of the Florin Group, and my name is Dick Dowdy. My sobriety date is October the 4th, 1977. And I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be able to come and share my experience, strength, and hope with you folks. I'm happy to sit next to Bev. I've known as long as I've been in the program, and I enjoy her message every time she speaks. She's a wonderful lady, a true example of what Alcoholics Anonymous is. And see some of my friends that have come and joined this celebration for the weekend. It's absolutely lovely. What I'd like to do today, if I could, in the next few minutes, is just talk a little bit about Bev's water. And it's got the lipstick on it, so I don't want to use it. I want to say, Bev. I know. Am my time up yet? What I want to say is quickly I want to say that I was born in the east end of Hamilton to a good family, a loving mother and father, an absolutely loving mother and father. And during a depression, my mom and dad moved into the house with his dad and a mother, and my grandma passed away. And so it was my grandfather, my mother and my father, my aunt and uncle, me and my 2 brothers and my 2 cousins until the depression was over. And once that was over, my aunt and uncle moved across the road with my cousins, and we lived on Balmoral, and I could get down and say it was a happy home. And for the most part, for me personally, I'm the oldest of 3 children. It was happy. But unfortunately, alcoholism was in our family. And what I always want to talk about is the disease of alcoholism in families, how the disease affects the family. I don't mean the family that drinks. I mean the person that has the alcohol that affects the family. And during my drinking, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand all of what I'm going to tell you until I came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because I lived at a home on Balmoral in the east end of Hamilton, the northeast end of Hamilton, and I love that grandfather. Irish, dressed up in a suit and tie when he was sober, go to church with him on Sunday morning, all the right stuff. When my grandfather took a drink, he was horrible, absolutely horrible, out of control. He wanted to beat his daughter-in-law up, my mother. And I watched as a young person how the alcoholism affected a home, the ones we loved the most. How it affected me when I drank. I hurt the ones I loved the most. And I watched my mother hate the man with a passion, hate him as a result of the drinking. And I watched my father become a little man. I love my father, but he became a little man because, you see, he loved his wife. He loved his father. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to deal with it. So he just sat back and let it all happen. And it was horrible, just horrible. When he went on those binges, it was just terrible. And eventually we would have to leave the house and go to our aunt and uncles or somewhere and stay until my grandfather got over his binge and come back. And he'd be sorry as all get out and promise not to do it again, only to do it again. One day I come home from school and my mother was at the front door. I could see the hate in her eyes. Love my mother. My mother lived to 101st, and I'll get to that hopefully. And she grabbed me by the hand and she says, "Come on, I want to show you what a dirty old drunk does." And she took me up the stairs of this landing, and my grandfather was laying on the floor. His pants was down, his hands were stretched out, glasses 6 inches from his hand, and a bunch of change on the floor. And my mother said, "Pick up the change. He's a dirty old drunk, and spend the change. He's only going to buy it on alcohol." And I did what my mother said. I picked it up and I spent the money. I watched my mother go over to that old man on the floor that was unconscious, and I watched her step on those glasses. And I watched her grind those glasses into 1,000 pieces. Just grind, grind, and grind. Getting the hate out. Because what she was doing to her family, to her husband, to her children. And that's what I know. My mother hated alcohol. Absolutely hated alcohol with a passion. Hated it. She said to me I could never have parties because if I had a party and people come with alcohol, he'd be off and running. So you get the picture. You think that I would know that growing up as the oldest son in that house. You think that I would understand all of those things. But you know what I realize today, that if you're an alcoholic, it's a disease. It doesn't matter what happens in my family. It doesn't matter what happened to my grandfather. It doesn't matter what happened to anybody. I have the disease of alcoholism. When I take a drink, I cannot stop drinking. We all drink differently, but if you're an alcoholic, we get there eventually. It's a progressive disease. There's no question in my mind. It's a progressive disease. I've been here long enough to see people sick and suffer, die yellow because they don't give up, and they die a horrible death. Or you can come into Alcoholics Anonymous, you can struggle, or you can come in and stay sober the first day. We all do it differently. And those are the things that I watched in my family. I watched those things happen in my family. I picked up a drink at 13. And I was a troubled child. I didn't do very well in school because today I realize I read backwards. All of those things that, I have that I deal with today, but I didn't know what it was back then. So I became a very troubled child, troubled right from the get-go, 13. I picked up that drink and it solved my problems. I felt good. I was in the wine cellar of one of my Italian friends. I went to a sort of Irish-Italian school, Sherman and Barton. And I loved it until they transferred me up to a sort of high-end school because I was out of the district and I hated it. And so I got in trouble. I got to tell you, I was a runner as a young person, and I would always run across the streets. I would hop on a freight train and get across the states with people, and I would get arrested, thrown into jail. My mother would come and get me. She was better than any lawyer I could ever have hired. I'm blessed to have two people in my life, two women in my life that I can tell you that saved my life. My mother never give up on me or my brothers. Never for 1 second did my mother give up on me. My wife I met at 13. I picked up a drink at 13, and I met my wife at 13. And she stayed with me through the whole thing. We were married 60 years last year. 60 years in this program. Because of this program. Because of you people. It's the people at Alcoholics Anonymous that taught me how to live, is what happened to me in my life. So here I am drinking at 13. Now, who would ever have thought at 13 years of age, knowing the things that I know, I would end up at 33 sleeping in the back seat of a taxi? And I got to share this with you. If any of you have been in a taxi, and you know what the back seat of a taxi looks like after people get out of that taxi, you do not want to sleep in the back seat of a taxi. And this taxi was an old taxi that was in the back of a car, you see, because I own part of that taxi company, second largest taxi company in Hamilton. I was the manager of that taxi. And I couldn't stay sober. We were the biggest bootleggers on wheels in the city of Hamilton back in those days, and they wouldn't give me alcohol because I was a drunk. My partners wouldn't let me have alcohol. And that's where my drinking ended up that many years later, at 33. All of those things, it's a progressive disease. Did I know that? No. But I can stand here and tell you this, I don't have a lot of education, but I'm not stupid. I have a lot of good ideas. I did a lot of good things in my life. I had a store in a little town I lived in Dundas. I was part owner of that cab stand. It was very successful. I was a great starter. That's the ego. Well, what I want to tell you, I was a poor finisher. Because you can be a great starter as an alcoholic, but because it's a progressive disease, as it is in my life, and alcohol is a progressive disease, it doesn't get better. And it never got better for me. So for the first 6, we had that store for 6 years, and I said to my wife when I coaxed her to buy it, because don't you know I'm going to be a millionaire? Big, big dreams as a young person. And I said, I'll be there with you for that whole time we have that store. And I was there for a year. The next 5 years she ran that store because I was too drunk to be in the front store to serve people. I wasn't too drunk to get in the back of the garage with the people that wanted to come in the store and drink like I drank. I bought a taxi because don't you know I worked at a steel mill. And you know, here's the thing about people in your life. As I look back in sobriety, whether I was in the Army, whether I was working in a steel mill, even when I was working in a taxi business, doing the things that I was doing, and there was a lot of different people in the taxi business. And I like to gravitate to the most illegal stuff going. I'll leave it at that. But people would come to me and they would say, Dick, you're a good soldier. We like what you do. We like what you're becoming. Do you think you're drinking too much? If you don't hang around those people, you'll be okay. You'll be a good soldier. And I'd say to myself, stupid. Why don't they mind their own business? What's that got to do with anything? I'd be in the steel mill where my father worked. They put me there, and I started to learn. People put me places where I could learn things. And I would get called into the office because now I was taking time off. I was going into the hotel for one drink. One drink. I take the sip of that first sip of that beer, and don't you know I don't get to work? And they say, we like you, Dick. You can go places. We like the way you work. But don't you think you're hanging around with the wrong people? And don't you think maybe you're missing too much time off work? And I would say to them, and myself, I wouldn't tell them that, don't you know? I got no courage. I would say to myself, why don't they mind their own business? I'm happy. But I realized today, those people were trying to help me. Those are the people that I should have listened to, and I didn't listen to those people because, don't you know, I knew better. Leave me alone, let me do what I want to do, because alcohol was the answer for me. And it was the answer at the beginning. I got married at a very young age. Don't regret that just today. I'm sure my wife sitting here might regret that at times. But, you know, we got married, and my drinking was, after I got out of the service, was absolutely 100% out of control. Absolutely out of control. I was just absolutely, there's too many stories to tell you about things. But what I want to tell you is nearing the end of my drinking, my wife had left me twice and about to leave me again. I used to make promises that I'm going to come home and take the kids out for something to eat. I'm going to come home. I'm going to be a good husband. I'm not going to drink for the weekend. I'm going to help you in the store. All the stuff that we promise. I won't drink anymore. I'll be a good boy. And I would pick up a drink, and before you know it, I realized today it's not the first drink that got me. No. It's the first sip of the first drink that got me. And once I take the first sip of the first drink, I'm off and running, and there's absolutely no stopping me until I need to stop. For whatever reason, I need to stop. I would come home that Friday, and I always tell this story because you're not going to get, well, most times you are not going to get the second story. I'm going to give you my story here. And one day I was driving home after repeating the story in the car, and my wife said, you know that story you told when you were just talking? Yeah. She said, that's not the way it happened. Doesn't matter. I'm speaking. She's down there. I got to tell you my story. I come home that Friday afternoon, you know, and I had the best of intentions. I come up to the back of the door because we owned that building and we were living in that building. And I opened up that back door. I had had a few drinks. I didn't quite keep the promise I was drinking. And I opened that back door, and my wife jotted out, just shoved me aside and got out that back door. She went to a wall that was between our store and the next business, and she climbed that wall and climbed the fence, and I could hear her tell the kids, give me everything, all the money you have. I had 3 kids. My wife would never leave her kids. Never. Good woman. Took care of the kids, took care of me, watched the store, did things she should never have done. Lied. I turned her into a liar. Call up and call me out work, tell them I'm sick. All of that stuff that we do as alcoholics. And she was up over that fence and she was gone. I'm standing there and I'm thinking to myself, this is where alcoholism had got me. Good. She's gone. I can drink all weekend and she's off my back. And I was drinking all weekend, and it finally come to my mind, because I was hammered, she better come home for Monday because she opens the store. I know I can't open that store. You know, so I got the kids up. I said, Dad's sick with the flu. You want to try and find Mom? They come back and said, we can't find Mom. So Monday morning rolls around, the store opens at 7 o'clock, and I cannot get out of bed. I'm seeing things, I'm sick from alcohol. I called up my oldest, and she was about maybe 12 or 13. And I said, Kathy, I said, I've got the flu. See, this is it, what the disease does to us. It makes us a liar. And I said, I can't open the store. I got the flu. Can you do it? And she said, Dad, I can't. I got exams today. I got to go. I said, well, send your brother up. I told him the same story. He said, okay, Dad. He was 2 years younger. Store, 7 o'clock in the morning. Turned over a Coke case, stand on top of that plastic Coke case, serving people for cigarettes, milk, bread, whatever they wanted in the morning, taking care of the business. And then I'm upstairs drunk. I cannot function. I cannot function. And this is where alcohol had taken me. The partners I had at the cab stand, these people were, most people were hard-working cabbies. They're not like me. There's a lot of good cab drivers in the world for sure. But I wasn't one of them. And there was a lot of them in my cab stand that weren't one of them either. And I hung around with those. I drank with them the best I could. So you see, my disease was getting worse and worse and worse. The last story I want to tell you about my alcoholism is that one day I get a call from, my mother called the dispatcher and said, I want to talk to my son. And she called and she said, I got on the phone, she said, son, your grandmother, her mother, had passed away. She says, I want you to come to the funeral. I said, Mom, I'll be there. I will be there. And that particular day, the funeral was, I got all dressed up, all ready to go, just like I am today. And I went down to the cab stand just to get a little bit more work done. And one of the boys said, Dick, would you like a drink? Because I didn't know what I just told you. I didn't know what one drink did to me. And I took that drink and I missed the funeral. So that mother who did everything for me in my life, everything for me in my life, I'll be forever in her debt. And I missed that funeral. 6 months later, my grandfather passed away as a result of mourning his wife. And my mother said again, son, please come to the funeral. Please come to the funeral. Mom, I'll be there. I'll be there. Alcohol was more important to me. Alcohol was more important to me than my family, everything else in my life, my kids. Now, I'm not proud to say that, folks. I became an abusive husband, all of those things as a result of my alcoholism. I did not want to do that. I love my wife at 13. I love her today. I love my parents. I have good parents. I have no business doing the things I did to them, lie and cheat and steal about them. I lied, I cheat, stole off everybody. A pocket of money in the morning and broke in the afternoon. That's just the way it was in my life. Come to the part, there's a whole bunch of stories how I got, but what I want to say, because what we're talking about here today is people were still coming into my life saying to me, Dick, there's something you can do about your drinking. Well, guess what? My mother called this particular day and she said to the dispatcher, let me speak to my son. And she said, my mother hates alcohol. Don't forget, she knows nothing about alcohol. And she says to me, son, she says, I've called Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought, Mom, why would you do that? You know, it's bad, bad. She says, they won't talk to me. And I had a moment, I'm off the hook. Because even though I promised her I wouldn't drink, that's just a promise. That doesn't mean nothing, And she says, son, they're waiting for you to call. You see, somebody was in my life. God of my understanding was talking to me through people all my life. I firmly believe that. God of my understanding was talking to me through my mother that particular day. She says, but I want you to promise me that you'll call Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, okay, Mom, I'll call. Once I'm sober and my mom asked me to do something, I'm going to do it. And I did. I called up Alcoholics Anonymous that moment. Before I could convince myself not to. And I talked to a lady at the other end of that phone. Her name was Dora. She's dead now, Dora High. And Dora High never talked to me about anything other than her alcoholism. She just gave me her story. And you know what? I could identify with her story. I was amazed how I could listen to a woman telling me her story of her alcoholism, because we all have the same story, more or less. And she said, now she sinks the hook, see, just like you're fishing. She says, I belong to I can't remember the name of the group. And she said, I want you to come and Sunday night group. Marian group. And she says, I want you to come, please. And she says, I want to meet you. I said, I'll be there. I walked to that meeting, walked down to the meeting at the stairs of that meeting that night. I seen you people there. I seen you people there. I thought, oh, God, I'm not alone. That was the first thought I had. I walked down the stairs, and there was this fellow, Cliff Morris, long dead, long time, an old-timer. Suit and tie on. His wife, Georgina, was in the back making the tea and everything. He stuck his hand out, and he shook my hand. Bev talked about it. The greeter at the door, an old man, had a lot of time in the program, shook my hand. He says, Dick, do you want what we have? Now, I'm there not to drink, folks. I have not had a drink since that particular day. I'm there not to drink. I don't want to drink. Good. He said, there's 4 things you must do. Oh, I said, what's that? If you want happy, contented sobriety. You must do if you want happy, contented sobriety. I heard him say that. And I said, what's that? He said, get a group, he says, and become active in your group. Do something in your group. He said, get a sponsor and use them. Talk to them from time to time. Go through the steps with them. He said, find a higher power in your life. Call God. He said, I call him God. You can call him whatever you want. Call him whatever you want, but find a higher power in your life. And he said, go through those steps, those 12 steps to the best of your ability. Number 1 is 100%, he said. The other 11 are the very best of your ability, the very best of your ability. But number 1 is 100%. He said, if you do those 4 things, you'll have happy, contented sobriety. And again, I said to myself, because don't you know, I know more than him. I said, that's crazy. That's crazy. I just don't want to drink. For the next 2 years, I just didn't drink. Because you see, I was a dishonest person. I was in an environment that I could not practice the rest of those steps in my program. I couldn't do that because I hung with thieves. I did things that were illegal. All of those things that I did, I knew was contrary to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I was trying to have my cake and eat it too. My cake, and I couldn't do it. 2 years into the program, I had seen enough of you people that had the program. I had seen enough. And I come to the realization that if I don't do something about my drinking and get into this program the way I should get into this program, I'm going to drink. It's just another God moment, folks. It's nothing to do with me. I don't have this knowledge. And I got into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't think it was 2 weeks later, I used to go to a Sunday morning meeting with my kids and my wife. It was at the YWCA, and it was you eat your breakfast and you go, and there was a guy that read it, and I tell this all the time. His name was Harry McGeorge, an old-timer from St. Catharines, and he was called the Growler. He was a horrible person or he was a good person. Either he liked you or he didn't like you. Either you liked him or you didn't like him. And he liked my wife. And I think he might have liked me a bit. He come up to me this particular day. See, this is what happens with people, senior people. He said, Dick, he says, you're going to go into the jails with us soon. I says, no, I said, I'm not going to go. I am not going into jails with you soon. I said, I've avoided jail for so many years, I'm just not going to do it. 6 o'clock Saturday morning, he said, we'll pick you up. You couldn't say no to this guy. You just couldn't say no. 6 o'clock Saturday morning, pick me up. I go across the border to Attica Prison. Attica Prison. And I'm in Attica State Prison, and I don't want to be in there. They open these doors of this wall, close it, the doors close, these doors open up, you walk in, and there's people on this side, people on that side, all different nationalities. No good. And we're sitting in an auditorium similar to this, and Harry gets up there and tells the inmates, I don't like the way you're dressed. You're too dirty. You should get dressed better than this. And I thought, geez, we're in big trouble here. We're in big trouble. But they knew him. They knew him. So at the end of his little 15-minute speech of scolding them all for being in prison, they paired us one-on-one. He paired me off with a guy that was 12 feet tall, had muscles everywhere, and he was black. And I thought, oh. We started walking from here to that corner over there. He stopped me. I heard him say something. I said, what did you say? He said, I want to thank you people for coming in. Oh, you're welcome. Talked a little bit more. He stopped. He says, nobody visits me but you AA guys. He says, you know what I'm in here for? I didn't want to know, folks. He said, I killed somebody. He said, I killed somebody in a blackout. I don't remember killing that person. I'm doing life. I could identify. We got into the corner of that place. He talked to me for the next 15 minutes. He changed my life, folks. Here's a man that came into my life that you would never believe would come into your life. Here's a guy that didn't want to go in there. Here's a guy that didn't want any part of this stuff. And he changed my life. For the next 36 years, I had the privilege of going into jails and penitentiaries over 36 years. And I had to stop because my hearing was so bad I couldn't go in anymore. But I did that for 36 years because another alcoholic said, Dick, this is where you should go. And that's where my service began, in that area of my life, because I was capable of talking to people who got caught. Right, Bruce? Anyway, I have friends here that can identify with what I'm saying. So those things I did in my life because people, it wasn't because of me, because people that knew better than me said, Dick, maybe you should do this. That's the humility. You listen to people that come up to you, and if you like them and you know what they're all about, and they give you some friendly advice, they're not trying to hurt your feelings. They're looking at you trying to do the best they can in your life. There's no, you can either be a bleeding deacon or you can be an elder statesman. And it doesn't matter whether you got 50 years or whether you got 20 years or 10 years. You can either be a good person or a bad person in this program. Because we all get a different story. We all do things differently. I was able to make amends to my father. I had difficulty with my dad, and I became his best friend. He was my best friend. I was his best friend. And as a result of this program of Alcoholics Anonymous, just give me the sign list, nothing. Yeah, he's my best friend. My mother died at 101, and I have two younger brothers, and I got to be the son that they go to for help. I had two brothers that wouldn't talk to me, even though I was sober for quite some time, and I couldn't understand why they weren't talking to me. I was doing everything right, being a good brother, good husband, good to my mother. And I finally brought it to a head one day, so what's going on? And they had a resentment. The resentment was because they had to grow up under my name in the neighborhood I grew up. And I had a bad reputation in the neighborhood, whether they went to school, whether they went, wherever they went. Are you Dick out? Are you Dick's brother? Yeah. Away you go. We don't want nothing to do with you, because it got hung on them. And I was able to make that all right. There was a point in time, and my mother come to me. Mother had this. She understood. And she grabbed a hold of me. She said, take care of your brother, the middle brother. Oh, I said, hey, Ray, he's okay. He's doing good. Take care of your brother, she says. And my brother, a couple of weeks after that, got cancer. And I was able to be with my brother, and my wife and I were able to be with my brother every single day until he died. I'd go get him a milkshake just so he can get it down, be with him, talk to my brother. Had a moment to ask him, Bob, do you believe in God? He said, yeah, I do, Dick, I do. Those things, I would never, ever been able to do that in my alcoholism. Alcohol deprives me, it deprives an alcoholic of those wonderful, wonderful moments where we can sit with family and talk to them just one-on-one. No ego, nothing. Just, what can I do to help? What can I do to be with you? And those are the things that I'll never forget in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll never forget all the people that helped me in alcohol. I'll never forget the people that helped me when I wouldn't listen to them. Wouldn't listen to them. I'd be sitting in jail. My mother would come across the border, and I'm with this guy who just finished kicking the cop door in, and I'm in the cemetery, and they're trying to get me out of the cemetery with bullhorns. And my mother, I'm in the jail, this guy with a cowboy hat and cowboy boots is asking us our name. We're not giving up our name. And he finally says to me, boys, I'm not a regular policeman here in New York State. I'm a patroller or whatever, border patrol policeman. He said, if you don't give me your name, I'm going to beat the crap out of you. I give him my name in about 2 seconds. You see? Because I'm not who I think I am when I'm drinking. I think I'm bigger than I am. So, my mother come and got me and took me across the border, and my uncle said to me a bunch of things about being a better person. He described to me what I wanted to be, but I couldn't do it because I took a drink. And until I come into the doors and listen to somebody tell me this story, and finally I said, yeah, that's what I wanted all my life. You know what? It is what I wanted all my life. I want to thank you very, very much for being here and listening. Have a great day.